Commander29 here with a review of Episode 1 of the Halo show. Now I know this is a little bit late. By the time this video comes out, we'll have a few episodes out. But I really wanted to get to this because, I knew it would be bad, but I didn't realize just how bad it was going to be, and there's so much I want to say about this. You can tell from the trailers that this show was going to be awful, but I underestimated. Even though I knew that they said they didn't give a crap about like Halo lore or the books or the games, I underestimated just how bad this was. It was awful. And if anyone is telling you, no, it's actually really good, you need to give it a chance, they're wrong. And we'll get into that when we start talking about the episode. But before we get into that, if you want to support the channel, you can check out my Patreon or my Subscribestar, both linked down below, where you can support me for as low as $1 a month. Or you can click the little join button down below and check out channel memberships. Now this is a preamble before we get into the actual episode, but there are a couple things I wanted to talk about before diving into the actual episode. Now I'll keep this brief, but if you want to just skip to the actual episode, you can check the timestamps and go right to that. Now there are two things I really want to talk about related to how people are trying to defend this show. And they're contradictory, and it's kind of funny. But the first thing I want to talk about is people saying, well, they said this was an alternate continuity. It's the Silver timeline. Why are you upset they changed stuff? They can just change whatever they want since it's non-canon. No. Because by that logic, any bad video game adaptation, any bad movie based on a video game, that's fine. You can't criticize that. They can change whatever they want. Because it's an alternate continuity. No, that's not how that works. And let's be perfectly clear. The only reason that they came out of the gate saying, this is an alternate continuity, is because they didn't give a crap about what was in the games or what was in the books, and they just did whatever the hell they wanted. So they tried to preemptively squash any criticism that they changed stuff by saying, well, it's an alternate timeline, we can do whatever we want. Anyone who actually believes that excuse, no, I'm sorry. You don't just get to just change whatever you want in an adaptation. There are some cases where you can make alterations. Like, if you're doing a 2-hour movie, obviously you're going to have to condense some stuff. Those are changes that people accept, like, obviously. And there are certain cases where, for example, if you have a story that has a plot hole, but otherwise it's pretty good, and someone does a movie adaptation and they tweak things to fix the plot hole, that's understandable. But if you're changing stuff so radically that it's practically unrecognizable, then why are you even adapting this in the first place? Well, it's obviously because they have stories they wanted to tell, and they couldn't tell them on their own, and they know that no one would pay attention to them if they did. So you just slap on some iconography and names from an existing franchise, and hey, people will pay attention to this. This is Halo. And because here's the thing. For certain franchises, for example, the Sherlock Holmes franchise, there have been a bajillion different adaptations, ranging from extremely faithful to completely wacky, changing a whole bunch of stuff. Like, you have certain versions like The Great Mouse Detective, which is Sherlock Holmes but they're mice, or Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd century, where it's Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd century. And his Watson is a robot taking on the image of Watson. But here's the thing. Sherlock Holmes has been around for well over 100 years. So you have all of these versions that have been made. And so eventually get to the point where people kind of want to see things differently. So even stuff that is more traditionally Sherlock Holmes, like you would see something like The Elementary Show or BBC Sherlock, they're still very different in a lot of ways. But Halo has never gotten a proper adaptation. It has live action works and stuff that is made within the canon. But you didn't get a movie of, say, The Fall of Reach or of Halo Combat Evolved or something like that. This show is the first actual adaptation of Halo that is going into the mainstream. I'm sorry, but as a Halo fan, I'm not particularly enthused of people getting this really bad first impression of Halo, because they see this episode and it's awful. And is this really going to make people want to check out Halo? Is someone going to say, wow, there are all these books off of that show that I watched, but it's really bad and no one really cares about it, to the point where they had to put the first episode out for free on YouTube.
Funny thing. So while I was editing, I discovered that they've removed the first episode from their YouTube channel. It was ratioed so so badly and got such a horrible reception that they took it down even for free on YouTube because no one liked it. It's doing even worse than I thought when I was initially recording this.
The point is, you don't just get to change whatever you want just because you're saying it's an alternate continuity, because you still need to keep enough of it the same so that it's recognizably Halo, even if there are some changes. Now, the other defense, and this is funny because, as I mentioned before, it's contradictory, is you have people saying, this show is completely lore consistent. Everything that's in it is exactly the same as the lore. No, it's not. No, it's not. Not at all. And we're going to see something like that in the very first minute of the show. But there are so many changes about this, from the characters' backstories to having characters be race-bent, so you're obviously not being lore consistent in that regard. But there's so many instances of this, and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to miss some, just because I haven't read the books in, I don't know, nearly 10 years. So I may have forgotten a few details, but I know that they changed so much of the lore. It's absurd, and you have these two different people who are both trying to defend the show in completely opposite ways, and if the two main defenses of the show are completely contradictory, that doesn't bode well for the actual show. So with that out of the way, let's get into the actual episode. So the episode opens up on this desert planet, and it says it's Madrigal, and it says it's the year 2552. So we've already hit our first problem. You see, in the lore, Madrigal is an actual planet. It was also glassed by the Covenant in 2528. Way before this. So for all the people who are trying to say that everything in this show is completely lore consistent, no. But I also want you to keep in mind the year 2552, because that's going to be very important in a little bit. We see a group of insurrectionists playing cards, having fun, being jovial, and talking crap about the UNSC. So something I didn't think about when I was first watching this, I didn't actually think about this from the perspective of someone who doesn't know anything about Halo. Because when you're making a show like this, you also have to consider the fact that there's going to be people who don't know squat about the source material that are going to watch it.
Not to mention, you're going to have people who have only played the games and never read the books, so they're not going to know all the specific lore that's exclusive to the books, because the insurrectionists are barely even mentioned in the games. And so, like, they're starting this in 2552 from the insurrectionist perspective. Okay, well, you just missed decades of history between the UNSC and the insurrectionists. That goes way past beyond when the Covenant showed up.
Like people, like hardcore fans know who the insurrectionists are, and I get it. They're dropping us into the action, so they're supposed to explain things later. But I'm still like, but for fans of the games, this has got to be confusing, because it's like, wait a minute, what's actually going on?
So if you don't explain stuff, you're going to have a lot of problems. And this is why it should have started adapting The Fall of Reach. For anyone who doesn't know, The Fall of Reach is what I would consider the main pillar of Halo lore. It was the first book to come out. It came out, about when the first game came out. And it details a lot of the backstory of the Spartans. You get a lot of... Some of the most important world building is done in this book. You get to learn a lot about the different aspects of the world, and some of the beginnings of the Human Covenant War. You get to see the origins of the Spartans and a lot of the other Spartans that Chief works with. The main point about that is that this is where you start when you're talking about lore, right? And if you were going to make a TV show, you would think, well, let's start at the beginning. And sure, you have stuff like Contact Harvest, which you also probably could incorporate. But if you really wanted to dive into the lore, this is where you start. Now, the games don't really need all this lore. You can just play the games as they are. And if they were going to go that route of just covering the games, you know what? I think that would have been fine. They didn't need to touch on all the aspects of the lore if they were just covering the games. Maybe they can fill in some stuff with Chief's backstory and learning about stuff about the Spartan program, because there's a lot of just combat in the games, particularly Combat Evolved. So it's understandable if they wanted to incorporate some of the lore. But what they're doing here is they're just saying, you know what? We're not even going to explain any of that. And you can kind of understand the gist of some stuff. You can understand that the UNSC is like a military group or whatever, but they don't really explain this properly. Now, the insurrectionists here are played as sort of the scrappy freedom fighters, and they do a lot to try to reinforce that image. But in the lore, the insurrectionists are terrorists. They're awful people.
Just for anyone listening to this, hey, this is not what the insurrectionists are in Halo lore, all right? The insurrectionists are terrorists. That's all they are. They're just they're cunts who want power. They have their, they've taken rebellion deep into the outer colonies of the galaxy, and they wanted to turn against UNSC, not because they're freedom fighters, but because they're just a bunch of greedy, animalistic cunts.
Now, in the lore, and I don't know if the show is going to keep this, but the Spartans were actually made to fight the insurrectionists because they were on the brink of full-out war that very likely could end with them just destroying everything, the whole mutually assured destruction stuff. Pretty terrible. So you make the Spartans, and you take out the insurrectionists in a way that is efficient and quick, and you minimize casualties as much as you can, and you try to avert all-out war that would result in the death of billions. But then the Covenant showed up, and the UNSC was like, oh crap, we have bigger problems. And then they pivoted immediately to mostly fighting the Covenant. They still fought the insurrectionists here and there, but they were very clearly not their primary opponents. Keep that in mind for stuff that's going to come up in the show. So you have this news broadcasting talking about insurrectionist politicians trying to talk to the UNSC for peace.
And that is why Jinha has sent me and trusts me to negotiate an end to this endless war.
No, the insurrectionists wouldn't. They're not peaceful.
Did he? Pause. Did he actually say peace talks with the UNSC?
Yes.
Oh, the UNSC won't give us peace. They'll come at us with everything. It's like, you guys are the ones causing trouble. What the fuck are you talking about? There's no fucking... They're trying to make peace with you fucks.
Look, this is the very first scene, and it's already set expectations for the rest of it.
Flip the fucking script from the get-go. Talk about... How do you look at Halo and say these are the good guys? Who the fucking look at Halo and say these guys are the ones you should sympathize with?
They're trying. It's like they're trying to frame the UNSC as the aggressors here. Now, in the news broadcast, they're talking about deuterium.
Rather than pay a fair price for our precious deuterium, the UNSC leadership on Reach seek to enslave us.
Now, they're going to make kind of a big deal about this for motivations. But here's the thing. In the lore, deuterium exists, but it's just kind of a detail. It's mentioned a couple of times, and I emphasize a couple of times within the books. It's not really that important. It's just a detail that's there for world building. But they're going to try to make it sound like the UNSC is trying to, take all the deuterium, which, when you understand that this is in the context of them fighting against the Covenant, it's like, yeah, they kind of would need a lot of that. I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's going to be dumb. Okay, so they're trying to make the insurrectionists look like a bunch of chill people, scrappy freedom fighters fighting against the big evil military group. And I don't think it's an accident that they specifically chose to show the insurrectionist point of view first. Now, while that is stupid, and it's obviously trying to get you to sympathize with them over the UNSC, there is one thing about this that I like. There's this Scottish guy in the group, and he's talking. And while some of the conversation is stupid, there's one thing he does that I actually like. He describes the Spartans from the perspective of the insurrectionists, and they see the Spartans as these unstoppable killing machines. You can't kill them. They're just dangerous. You don't mess with them.
There's another difference between Spartans and Marines. Mm-hmm. Marines can be killed. Spartans aren't human. They're faster, stronger, smarter. They cannot be stopped. They just keep on killing. Without mercy.
Which is interesting. And then he undercuts it with a joke, because apparently Marvel has just infected everything.
You in and out.
But that one little bit, I'll give it that. Then we go to Kwan, our actual main character. It's not Chief. No. So there's this teenage girl with this ugly as hell haircut. And what's really sad is this actress is actually not ugly. No, she's actually really pretty. But they went out of their way to make her look awful. This is worse than Rose Tico. Rose Tico makes Kelly Marie Tran look really frumpy and fat. This makes this actress look awful. That stupid haircut. It's like a mullet with the shaved sides. What the hell kind of haircut is that? And that's only the beginning of the issues we're going to have with Kwan here. So she's dragging her friends out.
Less talking, more looking, Kara. Look, if the general finds out we left the outpost, what my father doesn't know won't kill him.
And they're going to find drugs.
Madrigal, the galaxy's highest concentration of heavy hydrogen. Power your ships, and power your drugs.
Yes, because their focus is getting drugs and getting high. So Kwan talks about how she can't stand Madrigal, and the first chance she gets, she's getting off this stupid rock.
This is why you have to stay, Kwan, to find shit like this. Too bad for you. As soon as I find a way, I'm getting off this stupid rock.
It's the cliche, I'm sick of this small town, I'm gonna go out, live my life. It's one of the most cliche motivations for a main character. But what's really important is that I want you to keep this in mind for later. Just tuck this away in your head. I'll bring it up later. So friends all start taking the drugs that she dragged them out to get, and she sees something in the distance. And she decides to not take the drugs and go and check it out. So while her friends are all getting high, she goes and takes a hike and finds a Covenant phantom. Oh no! And because she showed up there, she gets the Covenant's attention. And then they chase her. And then she runs to her friends. And she tries to get them to leave, but they're all high out of their minds because she gave them drugs. And then they all get brutally slaughtered after a scant couple of minutes of screen time. And what's so weird about this is that their deaths are horrifically gory. And it's weird because you would think this would set your expectations for the rest of the show, but the rest of the episode doesn't do anything as gory as this. Despite the fact that the Covenant keep attacking, nothing reaches this level of gore. Like, you have their heads being shot and exploding. You have someone's limbs being blown off, and then they get blown up. Like, this is horrific. And I'm not showing any clips of that, because even if I could get around copyright issues, that's going to get demonetized from the get-go. It's that bad, so just trust me on this. So Kwan launches a flare and alerts the people in her colony, and she runs back, and she inexplicably survives. All of her friends just got slaughtered, but she's surviving. And she runs like right off this cliff into probably like a 30-foot jump, lands on her feet, and just keeps going. Which, excuse me, your legs would be broken, because she was not expecting that drop at all, but she just keeps running. Because she's got intense plot armor.
Okay, no, broken limbs. I'm sorry.
Seriously, she is not a Spartan.
Like, that was like a solid 30-foot drop, and she just comes out with no injuries. I'm like,
she wasn't
I'm
even
sorry.
prepared for it. She just kind of ran off the edge there, and
yeah. If she jumped and slid down as she was falling, it's one thing. But like, she lands hard on her feet, and she just rolls and keeps going. I'm like, really?
As someone with maybe it's just because I have a really fucked ankle at this point in time. But yeah, her ankle should have got snapped there or rolled or something. Is she? Yeah, keep playing. If she's running like normal, I'm going to be a little annoyed.
Oh no, yeah, she runs like normal. She's not hurt at all.
Okay.
So having been alerted by Kwan's flare, everyone in that base is prepping up. They're getting ready for an attack. Kwan runs back in, and this is where we see they have guns like AK-47s and just regular old trucks. But they painted them. They painted these trucks to look kind of futuristic, like they've got armor and paneling.
Oh my gosh, I just realized. Look at the truck. They painted over it to try to make it look like it's got these like fin armor and panels. It's painted.
That's so cringe.
It's painted.
Why is this? This is so low budget. This is so embarrassing.
$10 million per episode.
Where did that money go? To make the elites?
Into the
because I'll admit the elites actually don't look bad, but like, is that where all the money went?
Yeah, like Maybe it's like $1 million per elite.
Yeah, we can only afford 10 of them per episode. Everything else is held together by glue and a prayer.
Holy crap! This show costs $10 million per episode, and they're painting trucks like this is some cheap Sci-Fi Channel original movie? Come on, where did that money go? The CGI? You couldn't spare anything for the props? And I know what some people are going to say. They're going to say, well, you see, they're just scrappy little freedom fighters who don't have a lot, so all they can scrape together are a bunch of old guns and trucks. First of all, the insurrectionists are not that ill-equipped. They're dangerous enough that the UNSC consider them a major threat, enough to make the Spartans. And second of all, this stuff is all radically out of date. They couldn't even try to make this look a little futuristic. They're literally working with vehicles from the 20th and the 21st century. Weapons from the 20th and 21st century. We're in the 2550s by this point. This would be like if someone came in with weapons 500 years out of date. Imagine if a group of people came up with swords and muskets and tried to fight the United States military. They wouldn't be much of a threat. The insurrectionists actually are a major threat, and they have plenty of weapons. Why don't they just have the Halo weapons? Now, there are a couple of reasons why I think they did this. One, from a real-world standpoint, they probably couldn't afford to make a whole bunch of props. So they just grabbed a whole bunch of AK-47 props and just handed them out. So it's a cost-saving measure. The other reason is I think they're trying to really emphasize they're the scrappy freedom fighters and they're just totally outclassed and they're definitely the underdogs. So you really should feel sorry for them, even though the insurrectionists are terrorists and not decent people like they're trying to portray here. So Kwan gets back and talks to her father, who from now on I will be referring to as General Dad. So she tries to warn them of this crazy threat she saw, and it's not the UNSC. So they're getting prepared, and about the only weapon that makes sense here is the turret gun, which is from the games, which, congratulations, you got one gun right. So the Covenant come in, and they start blowing stuff up, and this turret just does nothing. Now keep that in mind, because I'm going to bring it up later. Now, here's the thing. They only show elites here. Well, that's weird. Only elites? Where are the grunts, the jackals, the hunters, the brutes? No one else? It's just like about 10 elites just rushing in. No, look, bear with me. I'm going to have to nitpick some Covenant battle strategy here. So, the first thing that they would do is they would send in the grunts. They would be the first to get wiped out, and they're just there to swarm them and distract them. Then you would have jackals coming in, taking positions to snipe, and they would have sniped as many people as they could, and they would have moved forward. And then after that is done, then you have the elites come in with their backup from snipers and grunts giving them numbers. And even if grunts aren't very strong, they have strength in numbers. So one grunt, not a big deal. 100 grunts starts to become a problem.
The Covenant, they wouldn't just slowly walk in.
No, they would run in. They're like, no, they're coming at you.
Yeah. Where
we played the games. They come at you.
Where are the vehicles? Where are the tanks? Where are the revenants? Where are the ghosts? Where are their ships?
Gosh, I want to see a ghost come in here and just blow up this whole thing right now.
Yeah.
We don't see any support. We don't see any other ships. As far as we know, there's only that one Phantom there. And they don't have any backup. And spoiler alert, they're there to collect a Forerunner artifact, and they only sent one little dinky ship to get it. And for some reason, they didn't kill the humans around them, and they didn't take care of that first, which is weird because the Covenant are really focused on wiping out humanity. It's religious doctrine for them. Like, they're on a holy war to wipe out humanity. But whatever, they're just changing everything because reasons. So the Covenant comes in, they start wrecking stuff. Kwan goes with a bunch of the children and, hides in this little bunker to keep them safe. So Kwan is peeking through the door trying to see the action, and she sees absolute carnage. They're getting wrecked. And then she sees her dad's truck gets flipped over by an elite in a really, really awkward scene. Like, it doesn't look like the elite should have flipped it over like that. Now, maybe if it was like a hunter and it charged and flipped it, yeah, I could believe that. But an elite, maybe they could have pushed it to the side, but not flip it like it did. Whatever, right? Weird special effects are the least of this show's problems. So with her dad pinned under the truck, Kwan decides to leave the helpless children. And when one of the kids asks if they're going to die, Kwan tries to reassure him and tell him, no, we're gonna survive.
Where are you going? I have to go. I have to help. Are we gonna die? No, of course not. We're warriors, aren't we? Yeah, stay put. I'll be back, okay?
You know, we're warriors. And then she leaves them. If you know, you know. So Kwan runs off under the pretense of trying to help. Oh man, I sure hope nothing happens to those children.
Where are you going?
I can't do this.
Why is this guy running off?
To be fair, I've lasted a lot longer than I thought I would.
So this one guy from the beginning of the episode, who I barely remembered, and I don't remember if he even had a name, gets stabbed by an elite with an energy sword as he's trying to get into the bunker. And then the elite is like, hey look, more people, busts open the door and murders all of the children. Good going, Kwan! You left the children to die. Would you believe me if I say that this isn't even the worst thing she does in this episode? But it is funny how she managed to get out right before an elite would have come in and just murdered her. Which, as far as Kwan's dad is concerned, she is dead. Because he didn't see her leave, and he's pinned underneath looking at this door, and he sees them all getting slaughtered, so he thinks his daughter is dead. Joy. And then we get one of the most idiotic lines in the entire episode. So Kwan meets back up with the Scottish guy from the beginning of the episode, and he says that he didn't believe the Covenant existed. He thought it was just UNSC propaganda.
Oh, let my little go, it's all true.
What's true?
I thought it was UNSC propaganda.
What? This is why I wanted you to keep in mind that it's the year 2552. The Covenant showed up nearly 30 years prior, and they've been attacking all of humanity. They don't make any distinction between the UNSC and the insurrectionists. They don't give a crap about human factions. They're just going to wipe out all of humanity. So they didn't just attack the UNSC. They attacked the insurrectionists. They attacked the UNSC. They attacked random civilians. They didn't give a crap. They're just wiping out humanity because this is the order that they have been given. Now, before someone says something, I know that there are going to be people who say, well, yeah, you know, in the books, you know, they thought it was propaganda. Yeah, I don't have a problem with them believing that. At first, when the Covenant first showed up, I can believe that the insurrectionists wouldn't believe they exist. Because if they're hearing, oh, well, the UNSC is saying these aliens are coming to attack them and we need to work together, oh, yeah, whatever, like aliens are attacking. Yeah, you see, I'd believe that. If this was 2525, I'd believe that. But not in 2552. This is the year that Halo Combat Evolved takes place in. It's been nearly 30 years since the Covenant first showed up, and they've attacked the insurrectionists. The insurrectionists decided, well, not our problem, and decided to hole up. They just cared about themselves. So this idea that they just wouldn't believe that the Covenant existed, no. 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 No, no, no. Not in 2552.
Not to mention that the insurrectionists have politicians in talks with the UNSC, and they've never talked about the Covenant. The UNSC hasn't told them about the Covenant, shown them proof, and then those politicians for the insurrectionists didn't go to their people and say, hey guys, look, we got bigger problems. This whole Covenant stuff, this isn't just propaganda. This isn't lies. This is true, and we really need to take care of this. We need to work with the UNSC. They've never done that? I'm sorry, I don't buy this.
Seriously, this doesn't make any sense. Why the hell would you write this? The insurrectionists not caring. That's one thing. The insurrectionists genuinely going 30 years thinking that the UNSC was just lying about the Covenant, as if no one in the insurrectionist faction had ever seen any evidence of it. The Covenant are running around glassing planets and slaughtering entire planets worth of people. Did they think the UNSC was just making that up? Freaking hell, in the books, the insurrectionists encountered the Covenant decades ago. So this is so absurd. It's a change made that doesn't make any sense. And we know from later on in this episode that they've been fighting the Covenant for years. They don't specify if it's been nearly 30 years, like it is in the books, but years? You're telling me this has been going on for years of the Covenant trying to slaughter humanity? And they still believe it's a myth? It's absurd. This is idiotic. So filled with righteous fury, General Dad pulls his foot out from under the truck, picks up a gun, and starts firing the elite that killed not just the men, but the women and the children too, and he thinks just killed his daughter. But then, Master Chief descends from the sky. Oh, shit! And then he starts charging at this elite that General Dad was fighting, and General Dad actually, unironically, completely takes his attention away from the elite that he thinks just killed his daughter to aim his gun at Master Chief, going, "Spartan! Spartan!" Hey, does anyone remember those Australian NPCs in the game? You know, the ones that said those funny lines? I miss them. We need more Australian representation in this show.
Oh God! God, it burns! It burns!
So Master Chief is charging at him, and he jumps over him, and he goes and he fights and kills the elite. And then, while he was stupid just a minute ago, General Dad looks at Master Chief looks at him, and then they share a nod of respect with each other.
Ceasefire! I'm on your side!
Peace on earth and goodwill to men, bitches!
Okay, while he was an idiot for doing that, I'll at least give him credit that he's finally realizing, oh, these guys aren't actually our enemy and they're here to help us. And says, yeah, you know, you did good. You know, you helped me out. I would have died. So I respect that. And you know what? I'm going to give General Dad a thumbs up of respect. Now, Kwan and the Scottish guy witness them fighting the elites, and Kwan says, oh, the Spartans are helping.
They're helping! The Spartans are helping!
I never thought I'd see the day!
They're on our side now!
So they are! So let's fight!
Keep that in mind for later. Now, with Master Chief, they do some of these first-person views, like this is that Doom movie with The Rock, and the HUD is weird, because it's not a HUD from the games. It's the wrong color, you have the wrong placement, and they have things like a reticule and an ammo counter, which are, you know what, I can see them having that, right? That's not really the issue. Even if the reticle doesn't always line up with the gun. It's just weird to me that if you would go so far as to actually have these first-person views and show the HUD, why wouldn't you make it like the games? You'd think it would be such a simple thing, and it would be so easy to make people go, oh my gosh, it's the HUD from Combat Evolved, or something like that. But speaking of the armor, there's actually a pretty significant problem here. Okay, so Chief has the wrong armor. A lot of people are like, oh wow, the armor looks good, and yeah, it looks good for Mark 6 armor, but he shouldn't have the Mark 6 armor. Chief gets the Mark 6 armor in Halo 2.
Tell that to the Covenant.
So, by this point, and I don't know how they're going to be handling the timeline, but Chief should either have his Mark 4 armor, which doesn't have the energy shields, and this is the armor that they use throughout most of the war, or the newer Mark 5 armor, which is the armor seen in Combat Evolved. That was the first version of the Mjolnir armor that had Covenant-style energy shields, because they had been reverse engineering the technology, and they incorporated it into Mjolnir armor. And both of them look noticeably different from the Mark 6 armor. So why don't they have that? It's probably because the armor that he has in Halos 2 and 3 is more iconic, so you just throw in the iconic version. Despite the fact that timeline-wise, Doesn't make much sense. So I can't even give credit for the suit looking pretty good, because they completely got the suit wrong. Especially if this is supposed to be right before Combat Evolved, which we know that it's leading up to them going to the Halo, then he should be wearing the Mark V armor. And when he first was wearing the Mark V armor and doing the test, that's actually when he first met Cortana in Fall of Reach. They definitely changed that, I can tell you that for sure. And then Chief's team arrived. It's Silver Team. Yeah, you know, Silver Team. Those iconic Spartans from the books. Yeah, you remember. Silver Team are invented for this show. Now in the books, Chief has a team, Blue Team, which consists of himself, Kelly, Fred, and Linda. Now each of them have their own specialities. Chief is, you know, he's the leader, right? He's the one taking charge and giving orders. Kelly is the fastest, to the point where she's even got a little bunny on her suit there. Fred is, you know, close quarters combat guy with, you know, he's good with knives. And Linda is the best sniper. Here's the thing. You have discount versions of Kelly, Fred, and Linda here. But they're not Kelly, Fred, and Linda. Why would you change this other than to specifically not do what's in the books? Kelly, Fred, and Linda are very popular. People love Blue Team. So why would you not incorporate them? Especially if you're just going to be giving discount versions of them. Like, you have a female Spartan in here who's really fast and agile, but she's not Kelly. You have a Spartan dude who's really good at close quarters combat, but he's not Fred. Then you have this female Spartan who's a sniper, but she's not Linda. Why? If they were changing it, you think that that was because they wanted to do something completely different. But they didn't. They just gave us discount Kelly, Fred, and Linda for discount Blue Team. Just why? This is such an unnecessary change. Do you know how much you would have had people just nerdgasming if you had Blue Team with him? Like, it's basic fan service that does nothing to detract what they're doing, because these characters are disposable. Kelly, Fred, and Linda are like family to Chief. Kelly is his best friend, who he is extremely close to. And now all of that nuance and interesting relationships he has with them, gone. I'm pretty sure they threw out Sam too. If you don't know who Sam is, he's a character from the books who is kind of important. He's one of Chief's best friends. But I guess they just don't care about lore, right? Despite the fact that people are saying, well, everything's completely lore consistent. Gosh, I still can't believe there are people who are actually trying to say that. So you've got the Spartans fighting, you have an elite calling chief demon. So here's the thing. I don't know if this is an issue with editing or just how it was written, but it feels like every time you see a Spartan on screen, that's the only time they're doing something. If they're not on screen, it's like they don't even exist. Like, you have this sniper who's on the walls who you think would be sniping, but only takes the occasional shot. It's so weird, because sometimes you would think, where are the Spartans? And then they'll just materialize and start doing something. It's sloppy. And for $10 million an episode, you think they would have put just a tiny bit more effort into it. So Not Fred is firing what looks like a DMR without the scope, but fully automatic. Man, he's not going to hit anything with that bloom. And then he puts his weapon away, picks up a steel pipe, and starts fighting Elise with a pipe. I mean, he kills them, but why? Because they thought it looked cool? Because they were trying to have him do a close quarters fight? Just give him a knife. So now Kelly comes in, charging with her dual pistols, which I don't mind an agile Spartan using dual pistols, but you think she'd be using, like, dual submachine guns or something, or have something a little bit heavier than a pistol, but whatever. So she goes and she charges these two elites and does what is probably the only bit of choreography in this entire episode that's remotely cool looking. It's still kind of ridiculous that she ends up beating those elites so easily, but whatever. I'll take what I can get in this dumpster fire, okay? So she does these spins and kicks and guns them down, and then picks up a plasma pistol and blasts one And for some reason, she just throws it away immediately. Like, do you want to pick up that weapon and keep using it? But what's funny is when she throws it away, you can actually see that what she's throwing away is an unfinished prop. So either they didn't paint it, or they didn't do the requisite CGI that was needed for it. Either way, that's absolutely embarrassing. How did that make it into the final episode? Kwan continues to run around, not getting hit. Like, it's ridiculous. Everyone around her is dropping like flies, but she's inexplicably surviving, running through this battlefield. Gosh, she has such insane plot armor. She decides to run into this trailer-looking thing, and an elite chases her. And instead of, like, I don't know, ducking in and grabbing her, or shooting her, or whatever, he, like, goes, oh, and then he gets his head blown off by not Linda, who decides to actually take a shot. Funny, she's just been sitting there the whole time. And of course, she decides to chime in for the fight to save Kwan. Plot armor. So not Linda gets blasted down from her perch after barely doing anything, and instead of trying to use her sniper to fight the elites, she drops it down and pulls out a pistol and then is like, "Chief, help!
Help! Help me, Leon!"
Really? If she's supposed to be the Linda's one of the most deadly accurate snipers. She should be popping off these elites like it's nothing. Especially since she has a sniper, but she drops it on the ground!
It's right there, bro!
Oh my gosh, everyone's such an idiot. Chief comes in to help her, and he gets shot at by the Covenant until his shield goes down, and oh my gosh, the shield went down noise! Whoa! Blah, 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 blah. Oh my gosh, I recognize that! So Chief decides to take cover, throw his weapon away.
No, go back. Did you see how unfinished that was when he threw it on the floor?
Yeah.
Oh, that is unfinished CG over that prop. That looks so fake. You could tell that that's not real, that that's not part of the actual dirt that it's laying on. Oh, that's bad. $10 million!
Yeah, like they didn't even bother to make it look like it actually slid. They just moved the model over.
Well, I mean, look at how clean it is. That thing should be dirty. It's so sleek and unfinished. And ooh, that's bad CGI.
Yeah, and you can tell, like, it looks like it's not there.
It does. It's so out of place.
And then grabs the turret from earlier and just starts mowing these elites down. Now remember, earlier in this episode, that same turret did nothing to the elites. But now that Chief has it, he's just mowing them down. Look, the Spartans are stronger and faster and way more tough than the average human, especially mowing their armor. But it doesn't make their bullets do more damage. You know, they wanted them to be helpless in the beginning so they can get overrun. And then they wanted Chief to have his big dramatic moment, but they didn't think about remaining consistent. Gosh! Do you see what I mean when I say that the CGI issues really aren't the worst thing? They're dumb, and you can laugh at them. You can laugh at the wonky jumping physics, unfinished weapons, and some poor effects. But goodness gracious, there's so much wrong in just this one episode. So General Dad, who has survived the battle, goes and he sees the bunker where he thought Kwan had died. And he's real sad. And then he turns and he sees that Kwan's actually alive. And if you thought General Dad was going to make it through this episode, to be fair, he lasted a lot longer than I thought he would. So he sees this elite, and he decides to shoot at it as he runs towards it, which naturally results in him getting picked up and stabbed with an energy sword. Where are the Spartans during all of this? Like I said before, they're off screen, so they may as well not even exist. It's only after he dies that Master Chief comes in and kills this elite. So they're like, well, no one survived. And then Kwan is just like, hey, I survived. And then Chief's just like, alright, one survived. So Silver Team regroups inexplicably popping out of nowhere, having done nothing to take care of that last elite. And they've got the little radar from the games, so they should be able to see that there's a hostile, but whatever. And then they leave. They just leave her there. Yeah, Chief just decides to leave this random girl who had survived this slaughter. Doesn't try to help her, doesn't try to point her in a direction where she can go. Nothing. They just leave her.
I feel like, though, like, just leaving is a little bit dumb. Like, they should stick around to at least ask her some questions since it's one survivor. Because then they could be, like, because she might have insight on, like, the Covenant.
Yeah, like, you know, if she saw anything, and if not, she's an insurrectionist, so they might want some information from her, regardless.
But even then, even if she's insurrectionist, still, it's like, hey, you're the only one standing. Can you tell us about the Covenant attack? Which direction did they come from? So did you see a dropship? Did you see this or that? And then she'd be like, no, I don't know any blah, 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 blah. And if she's not useful, then they'd be like, I'm sorry this happened. We're going to go hunt down those guys.
Yeah, like you remember in Halo Reach, and they find that survivor, and George talks to her?
Yeah.
And he's trying to figure out...
Scene.
Yeah, and he's talking to her. Yeah, George is good. And he first comforts her, and then he's trying to talk to her and get information.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what Chief would be doing.
Find out what she knows.
What's your name? Do you live around here? I'm George.
Shada.
Shada? C'est pas Nev. Your accent sounds familiar. Chapron?
Tangari.
Friend of yours?
Father.
Shine along. I'm sorry.
Why would you be?
Big man forgets what he is sometimes.
She just lost her father. She needs a full psychiatric workup.
Get her on her feet. The body stays here.
Thank you, sir.
Signal.
I just can't believe they walked away, though. Oh, gosh, this is going to be the Chief is learning his humanity. Because that's why he's so inhuman. He didn't stop to talk to her.
It's like they're trying to make Chief look like he just doesn't have a shred of humanity, which, yeah, they're going to be going the route of, oh, well, you see, we're going to give Chief character. Chief has character. He has character in the books. Anyone who says that Chief doesn't have a character and that he's just a husk who has, no soul or something stupid like that, or he's more of a machine than Cortana or stuff like that, they're wrong. You have to not know anything about Halo to think that Chief doesn't have any character until he's miraculously given it, like in Halo 4. No. Just in the games, even if you ignore, there's stuff in the books that is, really heartwarming for Chief, and you see some really good moments, like at the end of First Strike, where Chief has an opportunity to report that there's something really significant about Johnson that might result in the UNSC experimenting on him. And he decides to opt not to report that. Technically, he probably should have reported that. But he didn't want anything to happen to Sergeant Johnson. Oh, that's nice. And if you look at his relationship with Kelly, you can see he's really close to her. In fact, also in First Strike, there's a part where Kelly gets seriously hurt. And Chief, loses focus for a second because Kelly was the one who got hurt. He's got an Admiral and Halsey with him, two VIPs who we should be paying attention to. But he loses focus for just a second because it was Kelly. Chief doesn't have character. Absolute nonsense, especially if you want to talk about the books. But even if you're just looking at the games, you can see he still has character in the games. Not just his sense of humor, but also in the way he acts with people. And look, specifically, I'll point to one moment in Halo 3 that I always loved. It's when Chief finds Cortana in High Charity again after Gravemind has taken it over, and he is trying to fulfill his promise he made her that he was going to come back and get her. And when he finds her, Cortana is out of it. Like, she's been tormented by the grave mind. She is, like, about to give up. And he gets down to the console. And he reminds her of the promise that they made. And he reassures her. And he talks to her, cheers her back up. And then they escape high charity.
You found me. But so much of me is wrong. Out of place. You might be too late.
You know me. When I make a promise.
Chief, when you get to Earth, good luck.
After I'm through with truth.
Don't make a girl a promise if you know you can't keep it.
You keep it. I do know how to pick 'em.
Lucky me. Do you still have it?
The activation index from the first Halo ring. A little souvenir I hung on to, just in case. Got an escape plan?
Thought I'd try shooting my way out. Mix things up a little.
Chief is a person. Chief is a character. Chief has a heart. Anyone who tries to say that Chief is just a heartless robot until he's given character is wrong. So it's after here that we get the Halo title sequence with a bootleg version of the theme.
Oh, don't you
No, shut up!
Don't
you patronize me.
Don't you patronize. First of all, that choir doesn't even sound as epic as the original one.
And I hope that satisfied you, because that's about all we're getting in terms of Halo music. There's a little bit more later, but it's not much. Like, they have really gone out of their way to not use Halo music, and it's absolutely baffling. So Kwan is just left there with her dead dad to just wander around. And the Spartans just leave, and they're walking on foot. They don't get picked up by a pelican or anything, and they're just walking around. Like, why would you not use a transport to move around or just survey the area? It's faster and more efficient. So they go out and they find that Covenant Phantom that Kwan saw earlier in the episode, and of course Chief has to have it pointed out to him because apparently he didn't see it.
Chief? Covenant Phantom.
But not Fred actually has to give him his gun because Chief, remember, threw his assault rifle out earlier in the fight and never picked it back up for some reason, so he needs to get another weapon. So they go in, they find these little ruins. I use the term ruins loosely because it's not a proper Forerunner ruins where, you know, they have all these elaborate like areas and facilities and stuff. It's just like a cave, and it has this artifact in it, which I think is a budgetary concern, but they probably could have moved some of the budget from other stuff to this, because you'd think that trying to make an impression of the Forerunner artifacts would be important, but whatever. So Chief goes and checks it out. We see this elite just hanging out in the back, and he's not cloaked, despite the fact that we'll see in just a little bit he does have a cloak.
Also, why isn't this cunt camouflaged with a sword?
So Chief goes and he touches this artifact, and it glows.
Why isn't he shooting them now, though? He would shoot now. Why is the elite waiting? If anything, the elite should be very offended that he's touching it and should be shooting him on sight because of their kind of, you know, it's a holy war for them. They see humans as, like, as blasphemous.
And it starts giving him visions of his childhood, which is going to be dumb for reasons I will outline a little bit later. So it's like super intense, but and then he has to be pulled back, and then they see the elite, who wasn't cloaked, runs out, puts his cloak on, and then runs into Kwan, who just happened to be coming at that same time, and he just knocks her out cold, and then just runs off. He gets in a little banshee, and then he just flies off. Oh, so they had some vehicles that they could have used during that fight. Oh. Glad they didn't. So Chief then decides to take the girl and get in their Condor and fly off, while the other three he orders to take the Covenant Phantom and take it back to HQ. And they point out how this isn't standard protocol, and Chief gets really weird about it. He's like, no, that's an order.
You three commandeer the other ship. Take it back to FleetCom for research and intel. I'll retrieve the object and follow in the Condor.
I'll fly with you.
No. Go with the others.
That's not procedure.
Go with the others. That's an order.
Like, okay. So Chief gets the artifact, and Kwan gets in the Condor and goes back to HQ. So we go to Reach, and we get to see Dr. Halsey. Now, this actress isn't the worst casting for Dr. Halsey, but there's stuff that's just off with her just immediately. Like, first off, she's blonde. Dr. Halsey has brown hair. This is canon. I don't know why they can't get this right. Maybe they saw the package on Halo Legends and thought, yeah, Halsey has blonde hair. And she's also British.
Covenant wiped out an entire rebel garrison before Silver Team could intervene.
Even if you completely discount the books, we've seen Halsey in Halo Reach, voiced by Jen Taylor, and she doesn't have a British accent.
What is this stuff?
Knowledge. A birthright from an ancient civilization. This AI is its custodian, and she has chosen you as her couriers.
Chosen? By an AI?
By this AI, yes. Her measure of you carries as much weight as my own.
Why do they keep doing this? So Halsey is looking at video footage of Master Chief checking out this artifact when Admiral Paragonsky comes in, who's been race-bent. She's a decrepit old white lady in the books, but now she's played by an Indian lady for some reason. Whatever, this is hardly the issue to get upset at this point. But yeah, lore accurate, right? But Paragonsky comes in and just starts lecturing Halsey about how, 150 people died. That's not a good look for your Spartans.
150 dead civilians in Madrigal is not a good look for your Spartans, Catherine, even if they were rebels.
We saved one. 117's bringing her in.
One survivor's not going to make my job any easier. The security committee is looking for an excuse to cut your funding.
Why are they concerned about insurrectionists? No, genuinely, why? They're enemies. Even if their primary enemy is the Covenant, which it's so weird in this where they do try to make it seem like they're mostly focused on fighting the insurrectionists, but then they're also fighting the Covenant. I'm like, I'm sorry, but in the books, in the books, there was a heavy pivot towards fighting the Covenant because they realized this is a way bigger threat than the insurrectionists. So why are they trying... they keep changing stuff, but they expect you to know stuff from the lore in order to understand what's going on here, but then they change what's going on. This is just like when I watched the live-action Bleach movie or the live-action Full Metal Alchemist movie from a few years ago. Both of those were absolute garbage. Because both of them had the same problems, really, where they completely butchered the source material and changed a whole bunch of important stuff and left out, like, really important explanations, because, they just assumed you'd read the source material. But then they changed so much stuff from the source material to the point where it was unrecognizable. So if you knew the source material, you were confused at what the hell was going on. But if you didn't know the source material, then you were still confused because nothing is ever properly explained. That's what it feels like with this show, where it's like, you need to know all the... Because who the hell is Admiral Paragonsky? They don't actually explain it. All you know is, I guess she's in charge? Like, they don't explain just how, like, significant she is as a person, what her actual position is, her actual history with Halsey and stuff. They don't explain that. You have to read the books, but there's an appeal to the lore that they already changed. So you can't use anything from the books to say, well, if you want to know who Paragonsky is, you should read the books. I'm sorry, but if you're changing everything, you should be explaining what your changes are. And this is why you shouldn't even bother making all these radical changes, because it's just simpler to follow. This lore is good. Like, you should have just followed this. But it's so weird that Paragonsky is like threatening Halsey with, oh, well, you know, they want to cut your funding. Here's the thing. In the lore, there are people who don't like Halsey, like Paragonsky and Colonel Ackerson. But they can't really do too much because Halsey is so freaking important. She's the one who gave them the Spartans. Without the Spartans, humanity would have died way earlier. They wouldn't have even had a fighting chance against the Covenant. And again, do you even know who Halsey is if you haven't actually read the books? Like, they reference her making the Spartans, but like, there's so much more. There's so much more to this that they're just leaving out. And it's just, this is the first episode, right? This is the first episode. This is where they're supposed to be giving you the basic world building that you need to have in order to understand what's going on. And they're just not doing it because they've changed everything and they expect you to read the books, but then they're changing stuff from the books. It's a mess. But why is Paragonsky moralizing to Halsey here? Like, why? Just, it's so weird, and it relies on you understanding a lot of nuances of these characters and their backstories from the books.
We've been fighting these alien creatures for years and we still have no idea what they want, where to find them or how to beat them. If that object can tell us anything about them, I have a feeling the committee's concern about dead rebels will go away.
So Paragonsky tells Halsey that Miranda is going to be talking to Kwan and asks her, you know, is that going to be a problem?
They want a friendly face talking to the survivor. Miranda Keys knows Madrigal. I've asked her to do the reach out. Is that going to be an issue?
No. The Madrigal object comes straight to my lab for first analysis upon arrival.
Now, if you don't know, and they're going to say it a little bit, Miranda is Halsey's daughter. It's stuff from the lore. It never really made it into the games, particularly the Bungie games. But like it never comes up, and it's something that was sort of like revealed, you know, later. But it's like, it's weird that she would be like going, oh, are you okay with that? What does Paragonsky care? She clearly doesn't care about Halsey. And she says that the artifact should go to Miranda because the alien tech is Miranda's thing.
Alien tech is Miranda's division.
John found it. It belongs here.
Which, she's an officer? She's a commander in charge of a ship? Like, what do you mean alien tech is her thing? Yeah, they made some changes to Miranda. We'll get to that in a little bit. But then they get interrupted, and Paragonsky goes over to this room. Paragonsky looks into this room, and she turns, and she gets really, really upset with Halsey, and Halsey tries to defend her. She's like, oh, will we stop this? She's like, "Who stop nothing?" She's like, your genius has given us so much. Channel that into the appropriate way and legally.
I told you that was a non-starter.
We have paused active development.
You've paused nothing. Catherine, your genius has given us so much to be thankful for. Channel that genius appropriately and legally. I've given you a long lead, Doctor. Don't hang me with it.
Paragonsky, of all characters, lecturing about ethics and legality. Okay, so let me tell you about the Spartan 3 program. So, you get this in Ghosts of Onyx. And good old Colonel Ackerson, who doesn't like Halsey, had this program. It's basically the Spartan 2 program, but way more unethical. You take a bunch of orphans who, you know, were angry at the Covenant because, you know, they killed their families, and then you run experiments on them to age them up, to make them stronger. You put them out by the thousands, and you send them into the slaughter for every mission. And you have absolutely no expectation that any of them are going to survive. So you have thousands of 10 to 12-year-old children dying by their program. The Spartans, as unethical as the Spartan program's creation was, where they kidnapped 70 or so children, a bunch of them died during the process of making them, and they were left with about 30 or so, and several of them ended up dying eventually. As unethical as that is nothing compared to the Spartan 3 project, which Paragonsky approved. So to have Paragonsky being the one who's lecturing, and here's the thing, a lot of this unethical stuff she's always involved in. Like, so here's the thing, Paragonsky is in charge of ONI, which is basically the Halo equivalent of the CIA. They do a lot of messed up stuff. And Paragonsky is in charge of that. She's done so much nasty stuff. And she's the one lecturing about legality and ethics here? Give me a break! And here's the thing, the true absurdity of this situation isn't clear unless you've read the books, which you need to read the books. If you want to know who the hell Paragonsky is, if you want to know that she's head of ONI, you gotta read the books. They're not going to explain all that in this show. It's absolutely mind-blowing. So when Paragonsky leaves, the camera actually shows us what's in the room, and it looks like a clone of Halsey. And this is implied to be the creation of Cortana, who, yes, in 2552 hasn't been made yet, despite the fact that in the canon she was already around by this point. Oh, there's so much wrong with this. Look, smart AIs like Cortana are made by copying a brain. Just the brain. Basically digitize that brain and use that to create an AI. This is how smart AIs are made. This is why smart AIs are so much more distinct than your typical AIs or the dumb AIs, because they're actually based off of a person. And this is why they eventually fall into rampancy, because it's basically their software outstripping their hardware, and they kind of lose it. It doesn't mean that they completely lose everything or go immediately crazy. We've seen smart AIs that were rampant for years and still function if they were a little off. But it doesn't require a full clone, and if I haven't watched past episode 1 by this point, because I wanted to make this video without watching any further episodes, even if they were out, because I wanted my reactions to this episode to be limited to this. So I know this is probably going to get even dumber, but like, an actual full-on clone making Cortana is so stupid. Then after this, we go to High Charity, and oh boy, we get to see that lady who works for the Covenant, and she's talking to the Prophet of Mercy, and he's reporting to her because she was the one who gave them the information on what to do with this mission, and she's giving him orders. Oh, this is wrong on so many levels. Like, this reaches a point where you have changed stuff so much this isn't Halo. Okay, so let me explain a little bit of context. So, the prophets are the reason why they're trying to slaughter humanity. So, the prophets and everyone else in the Covenant, they worship the Forerunners. Now, they want to go on the Great Journey, which they think they need to activate the Halos for. They'll go on a journey, alright? To hell! But here's the thing. They see that humanity can use Forerunner technology. Humanity are the Reclaimers. They can use Forerunner technology just by touching it. And the prophets don't like that. They've been worshipping in this religion for a very long time. For a very long time. And then you have this other species who can just use this technology like it's nothing. Yeah, they don't like that. So instead of trying to work with humanity, they decide to slaughter them for being heretics. And this is the origin for why the Covenant slaughter humanity. They're trying to literally genocide all of humanity because of their religious zealotry. So the fact that there's a human on High Charity, no less, working with the Covenant is absolutely stupid. They would never, ever allow a human there.
Humanity's purge is a fucking holy cleansing from a religious standpoint.
Yeah.
Right? They would not keep and call the blessed one a human female. All right? They just wouldn't do it. If they saw a human in High Charity, they wouldn't even bother torturing it. They would just fucking eradicate it. They would purge it.
The only reason they were using Johnson in Halo 3 at the end was out of sheer desperation. they did not have any options. They couldn't use it the way humans can, so they were going to use a human, and then they were just going to, just throw them away, and then they'd go on their great journey, No one would have to know.
I admit, I need your help. But that secret dies with all the rest.
They would never allow a human on High Charity. They would never allow a human to work with the Covenant. And especially, they wouldn't be taking orders from a human. And I don't care if someone's going to try to say, well, they explain it, or, there's this changed backstory. I don't care. This is not the Covenant. You have changed stuff so much, it doesn't make any sense. Not to mention, her outfit looks stupid. And Mercy notices that she's reading a book, and he was like, you're reading the people's work to understand our enemy better. Like, he's too stupid to realize that she's like, all flustered, like, I was reading the book. Because she's clearly reading the book, and she misses humanity. I don't care. If she's working with the Covenant to genocide humanity, I don't care. I don't have any sympathy for her. Don't try, especially right off the bat, they're trying to make you feel sympathetic for her. When, I'm sorry, no.
Well, and you know what this is? They had a story idea for a sci-fi story where aliens used a human to fight against other
humans. And they're just
humans.
cramming it with Halo, even though it makes no sense for Halo.
So Kwan wakes up on the Condor, and Chief's just chilling with the artifact, and she's like beating on it, trying to get his attention, and then a hologram of Miranda shows up. If you thought things were bad, hoo boy, you have no idea what's coming.
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
So Miranda, who of course is black like Captain Keyes, we knew Keyes was race bent from the beginning, but trust me, this is not even close to the biggest issue with Miranda here. So they don't even try to give her hair to make her look like Miranda or anything. They don't even try. But she talks to Kwan, and she's trying to be polite to her. She's trying to talk with her and say, look, we respected General Ha, and, we respected how he ran things, which, I'm sorry, no, they wouldn't be respecting insurrectionists. So Miranda talks to her and tries to, be polite and nice, and she offers Kwan a chance to send a message out to the other insurrectionists to warn them about the Covenant, and say, hey, the UNSC and their Spartans are actually fighting the Covenant, and they're actually helping us. They're not really our enemies. And she's like, maybe we can work together and make some peace.
If you would upload a few words to the other colonies, just explaining what you saw, the brutality of the Covenant, the fact that the Spartans are actually taking them on. I think that it would go a long way to putting aside whatever these politicians are bickering about and helping us focus on the real war.
And then she says, what if I... And then she says,
yeah, let's do it. What if I say the UNSC sent a bunch of Spartans to attack us? That's not true. They killed over 100 innocent people. And then you kidnapped me to force me to say it was all the aliens.
She's like, we have everything on video. She says, you people can make video look like anything.
The entire encounter was recorded. You people can make video look like anything. We've seen your Spartan propaganda broadcasts. You think the outer colonies don't see through that? And when they hear my version, you can forget about unity or whatever. Those other colonies are gonna run from the UNSC as fast as they can.
Okay. Now, you would think Miranda's first response would be, okay, that's nice. I think this is the end of this conversation. But no. Miranda is visibly shaken, gulping, she's terrified. She has no rebuttal, and she's just like...
What is it you want?
I'm sorry, but what? Kwan has an opportunity to inform her allies and friends, hey guys, the UNSC, they're not our biggest problem. The Covenant are real. Okay, it's stupid that they don't know about the Covenant, or that they think it's all propaganda nearly 30 years later, but whatever, right? By this story's own BS logic, she has the opportunity to warn all of her friends and all of her allies, hey, we really need to work with the UNSC here, because we're all going to die to the Covenant. And she's willing to throw it away just to stick it to the UNSC. Kwan is willing to lie to all of her friends and allies and allow them to be slaughtered by the Covenant, like what happened to her colony and like what happened to her father, just so that she can stick it to the UNSC. Her father died right in front of her by an elite, no ambiguity, and she's willing to just ignore all of that just so that she can still be mad at the UNSC. No matter how bad the UNSC is being framed here, Kwan is being insanely unreasonable. They're trying to be nice here. They're trying to help her out. And they want peace. They don't want to fight the insurrectionists here. They want to work together to fight the Covenant. And she's willing to let all of her friends die just so that she can be smug. This is the point where I stopped laughing when I was initially watching it and going, oh, that's dumb, that's stupid. This is where I started to really get angry.
Oh my gosh.
Horrible. She's so selfish.
Wow, Kwan might be one of the worst characters I have seen.
And this is only the first episode. Like, wow. And she's already so detestable.
Because no matter all of the lore nonsense that they did, no matter how bad the special effects are, how bad the writing is, to fail to make your main character Kwan even remotely sympathetic is absolutely absurd. She is evil. Like, flat out. She was stupid before, allowing everyone else to die, because she just inexplicably survived everything and runs away and escapes and lets everyone else die. But at this point, she's given the opportunity to help her people and decides that she wants everyone else to die. She wants them to get blindsided by the Covenant like what happened to her. This is one time when they don't do what should be a cliche story because it would make the most sense. You would think that she would want to go after the Covenant for what they did to her father, but no! Apparently she's not concerned about the Covenant, who literally killed her dad in front of her. She's still concerned about hating the UNSC. Kwan is not sympathetic at all. She is sociopathic and ridiculously inconsistent. But she goes up to Miranda and she starts throwing all this in her face and being all, mean and nasty to her. And Miranda, who should be a 27-year-old commander in charge of her own ship, is shaken by this teenage girl getting mad at her. And she's like, what do you want? She doesn't have a retort. She doesn't have anything. The real Miranda would never have stood for this. She would never be cowering, shaking in her boots at this teenager throwing a tantrum at her. Kwan mocks the Spartan propaganda broadcast. The propaganda with the Spartans is that they never die. Right? This is why the phrase Spartans never die, they're just missing in action. That's where that comes from. Because whenever a Spartan did die, they would always list them as MIA, so they never listed them as dying. It's to keep morale up. You even see this in the games. When Chief shows up and meets with Miranda in Halo 3, and you see all those other Marines who are injured and lying around, and they see Master Chief come in, and they're like, a Spartan! Spartan's here! He's gonna save us!
Check it out. No way. A Spartan? For real. You better not be. Oh man, he's here. We're gonna be all right.
Spartans are not just their greatest weapon against the Covenant, they're also their greatest tool for propaganda. Now, this is propaganda that's meant to inspire, so that they keep people's morale up as they're being slaughtered planet by planet by planet. The Spartans are fighting the Covenant. That's not propaganda, that's just a fact. So these broadcasts of them fighting them, that's not fake. And her going, you think we don't see through that? Apparently you're too stupid to see through much of anything. Yeah, Kwan, apparently you're too stupid to actually help your own people. Oh sure, the Spartans being invincible isn't true. Like, they can die. But Kwan's just being so immensely unreasonable. And the fact that Miranda doesn't have any retort at all for this shows that the writers think that Kwan is the one who's right. Because then Miranda's like, oh, what do you want? This is funny. Kwan demands independence for Madrigal. I guess you mean what's left of Madrigal, because everyone there was slaughtered, And no doubt the Covenant would be coming afterwards to just glass the planet. Like, you know, they did in canon. If there was anyone else on Madrigal, well, then they wouldn't have seen the Covenant, because we didn't see anyone as far as the eye could see there. If there were other people, they were too far away to see what was going on. And they'd probably all just get slaughtered by the Covenant too. So what's she gonna get, independent for a glassed planet? And on top of that, she's demanding independence from the UNSC. The UNSC are the only ones who can fight the Covenant. And you want independence from the people who you saw were capable of fighting the Covenant and actually is the only reason you're still alive? Yeah, they'd be like, sure, you got your independence, now you have to deal with the Covenant on your own. This is so stupid, and they want us to side with Kwan. But do you remember what I said earlier about keeping in mind? So now she's talking about how, you know, her father fought, you know, for independence from the UNSC until his dying breath. And she's like going all in for the cause. Remember how she didn't give a crap about Madrigal at the beginning? And how she just wanted to get off that rock?
This is why you have to stay, Kwan, to find shit like this. Too bad for you. As soon as I find a way, I'm getting off this stupid rock.
Now she's all for the independence for Madrigal after everyone is dead. What's with this change? And if someone wants to say, oh, well, you see, the change came from the fact that her father died and this changed her perspective. No. That's not in this episode. That's filling in blanks because there's no reason for her to change her mind. If they wanted her to change her mind, this should have been shown. There should have been a scene of her contemplating things or talking about how now she's wanting to believe in the cause. With her father dead, she's trying to carry his mantle. They don't develop that. This just comes out of nowhere. Now she wants independence from Madrigal because of her father. She didn't really care about her father before. Like, she was going off and getting drugs going, well, what he doesn't know won't kill him, whatever. She's so freaking inconsistent. But after this conversation, when the call cuts, Miranda looks like she's on the verge of tears. They turned Miranda into a spineless wimp. They cucked Miranda. I love Miranda from the games. She's fantastic in Halo 2 and 3. And here in this show, she's a wimp. She's pathetic. And I don't like that. And after the call cuts, they show Kwan crying like they're trying to elicit sympathy after that absolutely ridiculous speech she gave. She straight up is gleeful at the idea that she could destroy any chance that the insurrectionists and the other colonies could work with the UNSC just to stick it to the man. She is totally fine with them all getting wiped out by the Covenant because she decided not to inform them because they wouldn't believe the UNSC, but they might believe someone who's on their side. But no, she doesn't want this. She's gleeful at the idea of everyone leaving the UNSC. Yeah, and then they'll die. It's absolutely stupid. Like, if everything went according to what she wanted, she would ensure humanity's destruction. All to be spiteful and petty. And they want us to think she's on the right side. They want us to think she's right. I'm sorry, Kwan is evil. And no amount of ooh, sad tears is going to change that. Also, by the way, why does she still have the blood in her face? No one wiped that off? She didn't wipe that off herself? Come on. So we're back with Halsey at the lab, and she's got this guy with her, and I just have to point out, he talks so weird. Like, the way he's talking, he's like this, talking about the isometric bubbles in the veins.
Biometrics are all over the map. Body temperature is up.
They go on and on with scientific babble about the synapses, you know, with Chief touching the artifact. It's pretty meaningless. So as Halsey's checking in with Chief, she asks him, like, hey, what's going on? Is there anything weird going on? And he tells her that he's starting to have, like, memories of a family and stuff. And they start freaking out. Like, oh no.
Family?
If your first response is, wait, did Chief like lose his memories. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what it is. They're going to explain this a little bit later, but I thought I might as well talk about it here. Yeah, so in this version, they mind wipe the Spartans to forget their childhood in order to make them, you know, obviously more obedient. So here's the thing. So, in the lore, they didn't have their minds wiped. They were indoctrinated, sure, yeah, but they didn't have their minds wiped. They knew that they had families. And as a matter of fact, you actually get to see this in Halo 3 trailer. There's a part where Chief, you know, got shell-shocked, and he flashes back to his past when, you know, he's hanging out with a friend when he was a kid, looking up at the stars, and he looks over and he sees, you know, his helmet and stuff. Chief remembers his past. But they've been indoctrinated to the point where, yeah, like, they remember that, but they're serving the UNSC. Is it messed up? Yeah. But they didn't wipe their memories and try to lock away their childhood. They just trained them into being soldiers from a very young age. Unethical? Abso-freaking-lutely. But it's not wiping their memories. So they wouldn't be shocked if he had memories. And this is going to get dumber, but like, this is the whole thing of, oh, well, like, we're seeing Chief's humanity coming through. It's stupid, but that's basically all that happens here. So Halsey orders him to, you know, not be in contact with the artifact anymore, and then she secretly wants updates on him. So with Halsey, in the books, Halsey genuinely loves the Spartans. Like, they are her children. Like, she loves them, like, genuinely. To the point where in the books, she actually starts to genuinely regret what she did to them. Like, kidnapping them, putting them through horrifying experiments to enhance them. Like, she justified it before, you know, with, well, I mean, it's for the greater good. But, yeah, she does end up changing her mind. But she does genuinely care about the Spartans, no matter what she did. So, a detail that they absolutely got wrong in here is that the Spartans all have the same armor. Like, 343 has been really trying to change this, presumably for marketability, but as you see here, all of the Spartans are wearing the same armor. Yeah, that's on purpose. Because they had all this armor, and it's all manufactured, so it's all the same. It just, you know, it's fit to each individual Spartan, who they have various different heights and builds and stuff. But Halsey could tell them apart just by looking at them. Oh, she saw how they walked. She saw that specific build. She can tell you which Spartan it is. Like, this is actually something that happens in First Strike, where she actually sees a group of Spartans, and she can tell who is who without looking at their numbers, without asking them anything. She just knows who it is. Now, you lose that when all the Spartans now have extremely different armor, because they want everyone to look distinct so that they don't all look the same, despite the fact that them all looking the same is a part of lore, and 343 has not been consistent with that. But the point is, Halsey loves her Spartans. She would never have done something like this. No matter how many unethical things she does, she wouldn't be acting like this, trying to lock away their memories, and it's stupid. So back on the ship, Chief goes into the room that Kwan is in, and he does a diagnostics on his suit. Like, it's a little weird that that thing is in that room, but he does it, and he's trying to check it, and she's like asking him questions, and then she wants something to eat, which I'm wondering why Chief wouldn't have offered her something to eat. Like, obviously she's gonna need something to eat. Chief would have offered her something, but no, she has to ask for food. So we cut to a lab, and we see Miranda. Miranda, I don't know if she's still an officer. She was wearing the uniform before, but she's like a scientist studying aliens, and Captain Keyes comes in, who of course is black. And this is so weird because this guy does not capture anything about Keyes. It's, God bless him, I think he's trying, but he's just not Keyes. Now, I do think this actor maybe could have pulled off Sergeant Johnson. Maybe if he shaved, or maybe if he doesn't shave. Maybe he could be a bearded Sergeant Johnson. I mean, Johnson knows what the ladies like.
Oh, I know what the ladies like.
A big problem here is that, honestly, this guy probably could have played a captain. Like, he looks like he's a captain. I mean, you look at him, and he's just got that aura about him. He looks like a military man, and he looks like he's in charge of a ship. Like, he just gives that energy. But no one's really going to accept him because you're trying to say this guy is Keyes. You know what? If you wanted to have a black captain, just invent a new character. People are way open to that. There's plenty of captains in the UNSC. It's not like every single one of them is specifically named and shown. You know, you could have invented a character and had him be a friend of Keyes. So Jacob Keyes and Miranda are talking, and they reveal that Halsey is her mother, and she very much resents Halsey. Like, she hates her. In this show, they really crank up Miranda's resentment to Halsey, and they make it just full-blown hatred. Now, this isn't how it is in the lore and in the books. We know this because we actually have Halsey's journal, which comes with the special edition for Halo Reach, which I just opened up to get this. So in Halsey's journal, there's actually an entry for April 6, 2550 that really sheds a lot of light on her relationship with Miranda. So I'll read this out just so you understand what I'm talking about. Years ago, despite my best efforts, I couldn't dissuade Miranda from joining the UNSC or OCS, or finally, requesting duty on a ship of the line. Not that she was even answering my letters at that point. I tried reason and logic. She has always been resistant to those. Initially, she likely joined the military to impress her father. After all, she had her name legally changed. Should have tried to dissuade her. Instead, I let her go, quietly arranging to have her assigned to the outermost colonies on the Hilbert, an antiquated science vessel from the days of colonial expansion, now refit for long-range sensing. I believed it was the safest place any UNSC officer could be stationed. Lamentably, desperate times make martyrs of innocents and heroes of survivors. And the foolishly brave who defy all odds and live? They make commanders of them, apparently. Miranda and her crewmates rammed the Hilbert into a Covenant destroyer as it attacked 3 UNSC corvettes that were ironically responding to their distress call. The Covenant had properly ignored her vessel, as it had no weapons that could penetrate enemy shields, but Miranda must have inherited her father's unconventional strategic suicidal thinking, because she gave the order to critically overload her ship's engines and nudge the enemy vessel into the gravity well of Gamma Pevenus 7. Even a Covenant destroyer with energy shields can't survive a fiery atmosphere descent at terminal velocity, and the subsequent surface impact, followed by Hilbert's exploding fusion reactors. Miranda was only one of 2 of Hilbert's crew to make it to escape pods. And now Lord Hood has personally presented her with the new commander's insignia, a silver star, and her own frigate to command, in amber clad. After years of silence, she invited me to the ceremony. I didn't go. Because her father would be there, because I am neck deep in the final stages of half a dozen projects, I don't know why I didn't go. I don't want to say it. And you can actually see pictures that she drew of a young Miranda there. So the reason I wanted to read that all out was because I wanted to emphasize what the relationship was actually like. There was tension, obviously. And because Halsey isn't really a people person, she just didn't know how to connect to her own daughter. She was trying to help her by putting her in a way that she'd be out of danger. But it wasn't straight up hatred like it is in the show. Because Miranda invited Halsey to attend her ceremony of becoming a commander. But she didn't go because she was scared. She didn't know what to do. Like, after so many years, like, how do you show up like that? But she was invited, which means Miranda obviously had some interest in seeing her mother again, or at the very least wanting to share that moment with her, and wanting her mother to be there for her. In the show, she just hates her. Flat out hates her. The fact that she's remotely compared to Halsey at all by her father, she gets, like, offended by that.
You know, you are a lot like her.
Ouch.
I mean that as a compliment.
But Miranda is talking to her father, and she's trying to be like, I did all that I could when talking to Kwan. Like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. You didn't do anything. You kind of acted like a complete wimp. But she's in a lab being a scientist. Like, okay, so as mentioned here, she started out on a scientific vessel that Halsey had put her on to get her out of the way, out of the direct combat. Here, Miranda is a scientist ironically following in Halsey's footsteps and not her father's, despite the fact that they're cranking up her resentment to her mother to be way more than it was in the actual Halo lore. But then they're having her be more like Halsey. I mean, Keyes in this compares Miranda to Halsey. She's like, ouch. It's like, okay, yeah, but you became a scientist. Like, her actual position in canon fits better with what they're doing here. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. It's unnecessary changes made for the sake of having a change because they just wanted to do their own thing because they didn't care. And what kills me about this scene is if you had told me without any context that in a Halo show we'd actually get to see Captain Keyes and Miranda talking to each other before the events of Halo 1 and discussing Halsey and referencing her being Miranda's mother, I would have been ecstatic. That sounds fantastic. That's the exact kind of thing you would think you would do in a Halo show. Let's expand on the stuff that was already there and fill in stuff that was sort of established later but was never really put in the other stories. And then they blew it by completely bastardizing the actual canon. So any of the meaningfulness that could come from this is completely shot. And then Miranda talks about how Halsey's always throwing roadblocks in my way, trying to stop me.
As if Halsey would ever do a thing to promote me.
That's not entirely
Please
fair.
don't defend her. She's done nothing but throw roadblocks in my way.
Halsey's always been single-minded. Work is the only thing that matters. I made my peace with that a long time ago. It's nothing personal.
Nothing personal isn't a great excuse when it's your mom.
I'm like, well, we see in this that she was moving her to a quiet, position on the down low. So Miranda wouldn't know that it was specifically Halsey trying to put her in that spot. But also, she's no longer the commander or is she a commander? Like, that's the thing, is in this episode, I don't know, because they're making her look more like a scientist, and they make a big deal about her studying alien stuff. I'm like, no, she was put on a science vessel against her will. She didn't want to command that. She didn't want to be in charge of that. She wanted to be just like her father. It's... So then Captain Keyes tells Miranda that, Kwan, succumbed to her injuries and she died. And Miranda's like, but I just talked to her. She seemed fine. And then she realizes that what he's saying is, yeah, they're going to kill her. And she's like, why would you do that? Why is this? I think you're okay with this. And she makes a big deal about this, about how, they need to keep the deuterium flowing.
You didn't order an Article 72.
Came from up top. I wanted you to hear it from me.
And you're okay with this?
It's not about being okay.
No, it's about keeping the deuterium flowing regardless of the cost.
It is not that simple.
It is that simple. It's an Article 72.
And again, bringing up the deuterium as if this is like some major thing in the Halo lore that's causing all of this to go on. I'm like, no, it's really not. Miranda gets hysterical. She's like, we're murdering a teenage girl.
We're murdering a teenage girl. I'm complicit.
We're in a war, Miranda.
I'm like, who openly told you when you talked to her that she was okay with all of her people dying to the Covenant as long as she got to stick it to the UNSC. She's clearly psychotic. But she's making such a big deal out of this as if Kwan is like some noble person who's being killed for no reason. And really, why is she being killed? Like, yeah, she's General Dad's daughter who was made out to be a really important person in the insurrectionists, though he lived on a crap hole in the middle of nowhere. I don't know. Nothing in this makes sense. But, like, they don't bring that up as a reason why of, she's the daughter of a major political leader or anything. But in that case, why wouldn't you capture her? Why wouldn't you interrogate her to get information? Like, why are you moving immediately to assassinate her? What are the upper brass, like, what is their motivation for doing this? That'd be kind of helpful to know. It feels like it's just there to create drama because they're trying so hard to milk the human drama and not the drama of fighting the Covenant. And yes, in the books, there is drama between some of the people, but it's not as just obnoxious as this. Like, it feels more natural in the books, especially when, you know, Nyland is writing it. It feels like you have natural conflicts between these characters. And here, it's just like, we need something super dramatic between these people. But I love how Miranda says, what's the point of saving humanity if we're going to give up our own?
The future of humanity?
What's the point in saving humanity if we're gonna give up our own?
Our own? The insurrectionists are not your own. I'm sorry, but y'all are not a unified group of humanity. The insurrectionists have made that very clear. They're the ones who don't want to be involved with the UNSC. And she's acting like they're just killing someone on their side for no reason. I'm like, again, it's just completely asinine personal drama. I'd like to get to what the Spartans are doing, to be perfectly honest. And it's inventing a lot of this stuff. There's drama. If you want drama, introduce Colonel Ackerson. Oh, no, wait. No, don't introduce Colonel Ackerson. You'd screw him up. So we're back with Chief and Kwan on the ship, and she's eating. Chief is not.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
She asks him why he didn't eat anything, and he says, because there's nothing I like. She says, what do you do like? And he delivers this cringe joke.
What is it you like?
Nuts. Bolts. Microchips. That was a joke.
Yeah, no, I gathered.
Look, you know, I thought about it, and Steve Downes might have been able to make it sound less awful, but it's still just a really lame joke, and it just doesn't land. Seriously though, this actor for Chief, he has like zero charisma. Like, every line he says feels absolutely dull, and not in a way that feels purposeful. It's like someone who's acting and they're trying to act, but they just can't get that emotion coming through. That's what it feels like. And then Kwan brings up the fact that, you know, she's met him before. And for all y'all at home, I want y'all to take a guess of just what the context of that is. Just go. I'll give you a minute to think. Time's up. It's because he killed her mom. And the funny thing is, I actually predicted that right as it was being said. It was the funniest thing.
You know, we've actually met before today.
I don't care.
When you killed my mother. Oh my gosh! I was joking! I was just like, oh yeah, when you killed my mother. And I was, I didn't.
The exact line! It's so cliche! So cliche! They are doing every single unoriginal cliche in the book. Her father dies, saving her as she watches in horror the slaughtered children.
The sole survivor of a cruel attack. I literally was joking because I was trying to say the most cliche thing you could possibly.
And it was a millisecond. You started saying it in a millisecond before she did it. Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. Like, when you killed my mother, I was just like, what?
Oh, that's horrible. Oh, wow. Every cliche in the book. Like, cliches can be fine, but also in a well-written property, even with cliches you've seen multiple times, fine, sure. But nothing about the show is well-written, so that just makes the cliches painful.
And they're trying to make this seem like it's such a big deal. Like, you know, she was at a meeting with insurrectionists who they still haven't properly explained what the insurrectionists actually are in this. But, you know, she points out how, you know, it doesn't make any sense that the Spartans responded to a bomb threat, and she finishes it out. He's like, well, why would there be an insurrectionist bomb threat in a meeting for insurrectionists? Trying to point out just how absurd it is. And, like, we still don't know what exactly her mom was doing. Like, of course, it's to meet about stuff about, to complain about the UNSC. But, like, why do they specifically target her mom? But, like, why are they making such a big deal about dealing with the insurrectionists? Because this is within her lifetime. She's a teenager. So unless they've completely changed the timeline of events to make it so that the war with the Covenant has only been going on for a few years, like, they should have been dealing with way more important stuff than fighting the insurrectionists. But the show really wants to focus on fighting the insurrectionists and how the UNSC is bad for it. You know, despite the fact that this should be about fighting the Covenant, which Kwan doesn't seem too concerned about. But Kwan then starts lecturing Chief, who's basically like, look, I was following orders, we had to do stuff. And she lectures him and she like gets him speechless. And she's like, you don't question anything? And he's like, oh, of course you don't. It was, oh my gosh.
What I can see on the ground may not reflect the entirety of the situation.
What does that mean?
Sometimes others know things I do not.
It ever occurred to you that it might work the other way around?
Then you question everything.
And someone told you that's bad? Of course they did.
She's lecturing Miranda. She's lecturing Chief. She's absolutely unbearable. And this is the character they want you to side with. She's the one who's winning arguments with Miranda Keyes and winning arguments with John 117. Holy crap! Here's the thing. Mary Sue's can be really annoying. And while she isn't a Mary Sue in terms of power, she's a Mary Sue in how she's being treated. Because they really want you to love her. She's more like a Bella Swan type of Mary Sue, to be perfectly honest. But here's the thing. When you have a Mary Sue like Rey, like in the Star Wars sequels, Rey's an absolutely awfully written character. The entire trilogy, she is awful, she's inconsistent, she's completely ridiculous. But she is nice. Like, she's obnoxiously perfect, but I would take someone being obnoxiously perfect than being obnoxiously evil while being treated like she's perfect. Because she is an absolute, she's not even just a jerk. She's a nutcase. And she's so ridiculously inconsistent, ping-ponging between characterizations. Sometimes she's really terrified and scared. Sometimes she's girl-bossing it against, the higher powers. Sometimes she just doesn't care about Madrigal. But then she's fighting for the independence. She leaves a bunch of children to die without doing anything to help them. And then she's lecturing other people about what they should be doing. It's so weird. And in just one episode, we have ping-ponged her character in one episode. Like, seriously, they gave her the cliche motivation of, I want to get off this rock. Which is basically just a discount version of Luke Skywalker's motivation, who is a far better written character. And then they couldn't even stick to that, because now apparently she's all for the independence for Madrigal cause, with no actual development for why she changed her mind. Just a couple of scenes ago, she was outright announcing how she wanted to lie to all of her friends and allies in order to get them killed by the Covenant because she would rather stick it to the UNSC. And now she's here lecturing Chief on him doing bad stuff that killed people? Goodness gracious, Kwan, if everyone was doing what you wanted, you would have an immense body count. But then Chief gets an order in his helmet that tells him to assassinate her. And, he kind of starts freaking out.
What is your name?
Kwan Ha.
Why? I don't know. He should kill her. Because Kwan is absolutely awful.
Go ahead and kill this crazy bitch.
But he immediately goes to start sabotaging the camera feed in his ship so that they can't see it. And he starts going AWOL immediately for this girl he doesn't know. Look, in Halo 5, I can't believe I'm saying this, at least when he went AWOL in Halo 5, it was for finding Cortana. He bonded with Cortana, right? He knew Cortana. This girl, he's barely known for less than a day, and he's already willing to throw away everything for her. Why? Because the show really wants you to think that she's this absolutely amazing character. But it is funny that in order to try to avoid detection, he does something that absolutely alerts everyone at headquarters that he's up to something. Good job.
Good job.
Yeah, so Paragonsky is like, what's going on with him? To Dr. Halsey, and she's like, oh, well, he's having memories. And she's like, oh, I thought you sealed those away.
What's going on?
I think he's having memories.
What? Of
his parents.
I thought you'd sealed those memories.
It's like, yeah, this is where you actually learn what they did. I just mentioned it earlier because it was relevant to that scene. But yeah, no, like I mentioned before, that's not how it was in canon.
Not knowing why a walking killing machine is doing what it's doing is a risk that cannot be taken.
I agree completely, which is precisely why the Cortana system could be
There is no Cortana system, Catherine. No cloning, no Cortana. Is that clear?
So then they decide to remotely lower the oxygen levels to kill Kwan, and because they don't trust Chief, they decide to lower the oxygen level in his suit so that he passes out. And then he unpasses out and restores the oxygen in the ship by just opening a little panel that was right next to him and turning a lever. That's it. That's how easy it is. Really? Just that easy to turn it back on? And then for some reason, Paragonsky is just like, oh, will the girl survive this? And then Halsey's like, I thought you wanted her dead.
Take down the oxygen in 117 Super. Drop the O2 below 40. I want him unconscious, not dead.
Can the girl survive this?
I thought you wanted her dead.
Like, yeah, that's actually a good question. Why did you put that line in this? Why is she you guys ordered her to be assassinated, and then you're even going so far as to, kill the oxygen on the ship so that she dies of, suffocation, and now you're worried about her possibly dying? Oh, why is there so much inconsistency in one episode? So then Paragonsky is basically pulling out all the guns to possibly kill Master Chief if he does anything. This is the first episode, by the way. So yeah, they get all the soldiers ready to go and fight a Spartan. Well, shoot, they made such a big deal about Spartan propaganda in this, and they're just willing to completely trash all that to kill Master Chief, who's gone AWOL. This is the first episode. This is like major stuff. Even if they wanted to do this stuff, which it's stupid, especially before Halo 1. But if they really wanted to do this, you couldn't wait a few episodes to build this up. You had to immediately jump into it in your first episode.
There's an alien war going on. And here's another thing. The Marines wouldn't just fucking turn on Chief like this. No chance.
No!
The Marines love Chief and the Spartans. Also, by saying the Spartan's gone AWOL, you're fucking essentially tanking the whole Spartan narrative. Why are these guys going to try and kill one of their fucking saviors? Also, how do they expect to survive? They won't. It's like these cunts are unkillable, right? Oh, until they are. Until we need to put them down, then they're killable all of a sudden.
Yeah, we're going to sound an alarm and be very public about targeting a Spartan.
Dumb.
So they get not blue team in, and Halsey personally calls them in to subvert orders that they were given to fight Master Chief, and she wants them to protect him.
You've been dispatched by Fleet Command to neutralize him. I'm superseding those orders. Whatever he's experiencing, there are other available solutions.
Okay, you know what? To be fair, I can see Halsey doing something like this. The context is stupid, but at least this is kind of like Halsey. So after saving Kwan's life, Chief is trying to prepare, to get ready for the fact that he's gone AWOL, and UNSC is not going to be happy about that. And then Kwan comes back with a gun. She's pointing this rifle at him. First of all, you just left the guns open for her? And second, why is she trying to kill him? He saved her life multiple times. Yes, he left her just there at first, but he did pick her up, and he was bringing her to a populated planet where she, even as a prisoner, she'd be in a way better position than she would be just starving in the middle of a dust cloud. And she's trying to kill a Spartan, and they made such a big deal about how tough Spartans are. What do you think she's gonna do? And as Chief points out, he's like, this is Mark 6 millionaire armor. It shouldn't be Mark 6, but he's describing Mark 6 millionaire armor. And And he could literally just walk up to her, grab the barrel of the gun, and just turn it. But what does he do? He starts to take his helmet off, and they have this swelling music making such a big deal about it, and how, oh my gosh, it's so dramatic and it's so intense and emotional. He pulls his helmet off, and he's a dude. Yeah. And he's like, if you want to shoot me, you gotta aim up here. Why are you entertaining this? You should take the gun from her and tell her to sit down and that you just saved her life. Kwan is so freaking ungrateful. Oh my gosh. Okay, so here's the thing. So at least with the games, we don't see Chief's face. 343 tried to do that with Halo 4 when you got to see his eyes, and the fandom revolted because it is offensive to show his face in the games. Now, something I have seen, and I have to address this, people will say, well, in the novels, he takes his helmet off. Okay, yeah. And you know what? If there was a proper adaptation of The Fall of Reach, because the animated version of Fall of Reach was absolutely awful. Yes, if they showed him taking his helmet off, they showed a younger Chief without his helmet, that wouldn't be a big deal. That's in the books. And when you're reading the books, everyone would kind of picture what they would imagine he looks like anyway. But for an actual mainline adaptation, you're going to want to keep that to a minimum. Or if you're going to have him take his helmet off, maybe try to do some work to obscure his face. Like, at least try. Don't just blatantly have his face shoved in the camera. Look, in terms of the games, in terms of what most people who are Halo fans know, you don't show Chief's face. You just don't. That doesn't mean that Chief isn't a character. That just means that for the sake of the game, you are playing as Chief. So you don't show his face. And if you are going to show his face, at least make it make sense. Not have him take his helmet off with a hostile, psychotic teenager with a gun. And yeah, apparently she's convinced by that. Like, oh wow, you're a human. Now, 343 tried to defend this. People were like, well, 343 is like, yeah, they wouldn't, you know, they're not supporting this. Yeah, so in the Halo Waypoint thing, they wrote an article all about this episode and tried to justify him taking his helmet off. So apparently 343 just couldn't let that go. They really wanted to show his face. And I guess they're totally on board with this. You know what? 343 might have had an easy win if they were just like distancing themselves from this. But no, apparently they're just going to go full on support on this, especially for him taking his helmet off. Now also remember the fact that Kwan earlier in this episode was like, the Spartans were saving us, yay!
They're helping! The Spartans are helping!
I never thought I'd see the day.
They're on our side now!
So they are!
And now she's trying to kill him. Again. Ping pong. So because Chief took off his helmet, apparently they lost all signal to his suit. So they designed the Mjolnir armor to be basically useless to communicate with or track if you take the helmet off. Look, obviously it's going to have important circuitry and stuff up there, but you're telling me there's no tracker on him at all outside of him having his helmet attached to his suit? That's ridiculous. But I like how Kwan is even like, well, why are you helping me? And Chief is like, I don't know. It's like the writers can't even come up with a reason why he would be doing this outside of, well, this is what we want to happen in the story.
Your Spartan just given in search of the rifle.
It's so lazy.
And you just decided to help me. Why would a Spartan do that?
They're helping! The Spartans are helping! They're on our side now!
So the UNSC is preparing to attack Master Chief, and he is, with his helmet still off, trying to turn off the autopilot, and he's like giving orders to Kwan of like, yo, take off this panel and do this. And of course she doesn't really know what she's doing, and she's not capable of actually doing it, and he's just telling her to do it, and she picks up the gun and just fires at the ship, and magically makes everything work.
I bypassed the compressor. You weren't kidding.
Yeah!
Shut the fucking thing. Are you kidding me?
Seriously, her plot armor is so insane. So Captain Keyes gives the order to hit them with an EMP blast to knock the ship down.
This is Keyes. Pulse the ship before you can load fire controls. Knock it down!
And they're being surrounded, and it seems like, well, there's no way they can get out of this, but they have the artifact. Now in this situation, with them in a down ship, being surrounded by UNSC forces, and they have a mystical artifact in their possession, what would you think would happen?
I swear, if it does something stupid like warp them out.
They're gonna warp, aren't they?
I guess teleportation.
If you said it'll teleport them out of there, no. As convenient as that would be, that actually is something that Forerunner technology can do. No. What happens is Chief touches the artifact, gets more memories, and he sees a memory of him drawing this artifact as a child. That's really dumb, and I'm not looking forward to how they explain that. But the artifact magically turns their ship on, turns everyone else off with an EMP blast. So Chief grabs the controls, flies the ship out, and that's how the episode ends. Oh joy! That was dumb. Seriously, teleporting them out, while convenient, would make some degree of sense, especially if you're familiar with, the lore or the games even. You see even in Halo Combat Evolved that, the Forerunner technology can teleport you around. But no. It magically decides to turn everyone else's technology off, turns their technology on, and allows them to escape. But of course, during this moment, they play a variation of the Halo theme. I mentioned before that we were going to get a little bit of it again. This is it. During this stupid moment, we get a little bit of the Halo theme. Goodness gracious. So yeah, that was awful. That was bad. And trust me, actually watching it is so much worse. I have watched this episode multiple times, and yeah, it just doesn't get better. The more you actually know about it, and the more you think about it, the worse it gets. So I was actually talking with Angelrin about this a couple days ago, and she actually pointed out, some stuff that I hadn't thought about even after watching it twice. The more you think about this, the worse it gets. It is absolutely baffling that they thought this was a good idea. They've screwed the pooch. There's no salvaging this. Like, I have seen people say, well, maybe they could fix things later in the season, or maybe they can fix things in a season 2. No. They've already messed up. They have changed the lore so much that anyone who actually cares about the lore and cares about the story of Halo is going to be like, well, why would I keep watching? If you don't know Halo, you're probably dreadfully confused about what the hell is going on with any of this. They have had Chief go AWOL in the first episode for entirely asinine reasons. And we haven't even gotten to the first Halo. Like, the Halo from Combat Evolved, we're not even close to getting to that. Look, if they wanted to do Fall of Reach, but skip to the part where, it's building up to them getting to Halo, like finding the artifact. Like, I didn't mention this overall, but there actually is an artifact that they find that does end up leading them to the Halo. But that's different than the one that you see in this episode. It's a completely different thing, and I have no idea what they're doing with this. But what we have seen is awful. Like, if you care about Halo lore, this is not for you. If you don't care about Halo lore, it's just badly written. And Kwan is an absolutely unbearable character. She is evil, but they really want you to like her. They really want you to think she's right, despite the fact that she's so clearly in the wrong. I've seen this problem with other shows where they blow their load in the very first episode. Like, they cram what should be half, if not a full season's worth of story into one episode. And because they're trying to get to the action, they're trying to get into things, but then, like, you completely skip, like, all of the important build-up to that stuff. It's people who want to just get to the interesting parts, without any of the boring stuff, despite the fact that even the stuff that's supposed to be exciting is still pretty boring. It really does remind me of the live-action Bleach movie I mentioned earlier, where they really wanted to get to the Soul Society arc, which is the second major arc in the manga, but they skip over all of the build-up to it. Like, all of the characters that joined Ichigo's team had build-up in the first arc in the manga, where, like, they're gaining powers, and you get to know them, so when they all team up together and go into Soul Society, you know who they are, you know what their powers are. All of that stuff was cut in the movie. So even if they did get a sequel, how the hell would they explain all of that without just having everyone show up like they are in the manga and then be like, well, this all stuff happened off screen. So this Halo show is a mess. It's irredeemably awful, but I'm going to keep watching, and I'm going to keep making videos on it. So look forward to that. So if you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching.
The enemy. I'll take care of you if you'll take care of me. We're walking up in line in that line.
And then you kidnapped me to force me to say it was all the aliens. The entire encounter was